Hey everybody, I'm Tracy Jones. This is David Barrett. We're here talking about Mack Amps, and today we're going to talk about his all-new signature amp, the Mack DB-40 Atomsmasher, which is the first of Mack's signature amp collection that they're going to be working on. The Atomsmasher is a evolution in the Mack Amps design. Came from the Heat Seeker and the Skyraider were the first two original Mack Amps that they came out with. And Dave, the first time I saw you play actually was at the Mod Club. You were doing your CD release, and you were playing nothing but Mack Amps.
That's right.
And you started with a Heat Seeker and a Skyraider, and then as your sound evolved and as your needs evolved, you and Don started working on the design for the DB-40. Why don't you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, Don, I had heard the Mack Amps at 12th fret from my buddy Mack Amps, said, hey, you got to hear this. And I thought, oh, this is like, it's made for me. And that would have been the Skyraider and the Heat Seeker, which I both have and both used on the earlier stuff, like the DVD that we did. And Don and I quickly talked about doing a signature amp, and we really did the first one, which was an 18 watt, much like the Heat Seeker, which has the EL84s, right?
Right.
And it's just a little bit souped up, and he kind of tweaked it, and it was great. But we thought, well, you know, we should really do another one, and we should do a 40 watt one with more headroom, more volume, because we play loud, the trio's loud, and we also like to, you know, clean up and do quieter bits and really have the amps to be responsive, and so I can really get a range and volume and tone.
So moving up from the Heat Seeker vibe and the Skyraider to the Atomsmasher, I know there's some pretty significant changes, right? We've moved from EL84s to EL34s, which I think are Marshall type of
as far as I know, it's what was in
tubes.
like the Marshall Plexi original type of design, was it not?
Yeah, and I know that the transformer, right, has been upgraded to a much heavier duty transformer.
Yeah, it's a much more expensive transformer, and it's more powerful. That's really all I can say about it.
And it gives, from what Don has told me and Steve, the engineer, it gives a lot more low-end thrust, which
really
I know
does.
is really important in your sound.
Yeah.
Why don't maybe talk a little bit about your sound and what kind of needs you have.
How I use
it?
Yeah. So, well, then the other couple of things we did with Don is I've always liked the Celestion greenbacks. So we put the greenbacks in the cabinets. I love them because it's the mid-range, really for me sits in the mix amazingly well. And we've experimented with all kinds of tubes from Tungsol and right, I think there's JJ in there now, and Mullards, and they all seem to be pretty good to me. I don't really, you know, like they all sound great. There's maybe subtle differences. Paul Reed designed the faceplate, which is super cool. That's important. So it's green.
Very cool.
And kind of
well, the Mack Amps definitely, they definitely have a real distinct look about them, and sonically, I think one of the other things that's really amazing about Mack Amps in general, and particularly about the DB, is a lot of players don't know this, but the traditional Fender amps and things that we buy that sound so great when you're playing them by yourselves, it's because they're scooped. The sound quality is very scooped, so it's very big bottom end, very bright, sparkly top end, and it's scooped, whereas Mack, I know, designed their amps very specifically to be very, very flat, which kicks the mid into high gear. So when you're playing in a stage situation, as I've seen you many times with Sasha and Jason, the guitar is really finding its way through the mix beautifully because the mids are very, very flat. And I think that's something that, especially on the DB-40, is a
well,
really
we made the
feature.
mistake in the early 90s when there was kind of this craze of a lot of the high gain rectified amp sounds, which were great, but yeah, it was often, you know, that's kind of scooped thing, which more and more I just crave the mid-range. I find it really sits and doesn't get lost. And it cuts better, and the tube, whole tube thing just mysteriously can always be heard. You know?
You know, one thing I'd love for you to show too, and it's sort of for players who are sort of coming up and thinking about an amp like this and thinking about trying to crack their tone secret, how important it is. This is a very simple tone stack. There's no volume, mid, bass, treble on this. It's just a tone control.
Yeah.
And what I've learned a lot from watching you play is you control a lot of the tone that you're getting through your guitar.
Yeah.
Using the tone knobs on the guitar and using the volume control to push the amp to where you want it to be. Why don't we look at a couple of things, like play a couple of things and show what this show what that's all about.
Let's see. Should we wind it up a bit? Because typically, let's see how it goes. If I'm playing the amp in normal setting, I have it about maybe 2 o'clock or getting a little bit on the verging of being dimed out. But if I want to do something clean, and I'm full over here, I bring the volume pedal down. But let's just say the volume pedal's up full. I can go from nice and clean, both pickups, but then I can quickly just kind of go. And then, you know. So I really prefer to do that than have A, Bs and switching.
Yeah, and I mean the tube amp distortion is such a great sweet sound, and I know that for Mack that was a real key to what they were going for. They wanted it to be for players who knew how to use the volume control on their guitar and were less reliant on pedals. But that said, these amps love pedals.
Well, they do love pedals, and they love pedals in the front and not in a loop. Maybe I have some other amps where there's, you know, it's digital and you use loops, but really the way it works best, like for instance, there's a Class A boost here. It's one of my favorite things, but if I take this guy, and it's going to be kind of cranked, but I mean, if I can go from just normal crunch into just a 20 dB boost, and
now, I mean, you're all watching this probably on a computer screen or probably at home. That sounds like a 4x12 kicking you in the back of the head, which is another thing about the Mack amps that I think is really amazing, is how much dynamic sound you get from a single 12 through the DB-40. It's really quite striking.
It's a step up from what I did for years just using Fender champs, and sometimes maybe like 4 of them on a setup which I had. But the same principle, you know, volume, tone, and that's just what I like. It's easier, and it just makes my life a lot, I don't know, it's just dial in the tone, work the amp really hard, and then just back off the controls with the guitar. And then all this other stuff comes in, but people don't really realize that a lot of the time, a lot of the stuff is off, and it's very much always a raw guitar sound, you know. Then there's very specific things that come in, obviously the chorus and the echo and some of the synth stuff, and there's a looper in there and all the modulation stuff. But you know, a lot of it's pretty straight.
The other thing I thought's worth mentioning, I mean, everybody wonders about this amazing guitar that you're playing, the Jane, the Dagmar Jane by Pete Swanson. It's an amazing guitar. Now, it's sort of a hollow body concept, but the pickups are Alnico PAF style.
This is really heavy. It's like an 8 magnet. That's a 3. Phil X is, Phil's a great guitar player. He's down in LA now, but he's a Toronto guy. And they're made by a company in California called Arcane.
No, but the thing that I guess what I was getting to with that is there's no secret switches or weird magic in this guitar that's giving you this amazing sound. It's the amp, and I mean, I've heard you play this. I've heard you play your ES-1275 double neck and your 60s 175, which is spectacular. And the amp is really, I find, watching you, it really brings out the best of the guitar. Like, I really hear each individual guitar. It's not that sort of stock professional distortion sound that you
it's really processed. It's almost like there are some very well-known guitar players that switch guitars all the time, but they process them so they all sound the same. That's cool if that's your thing. You know, and it's still one good sound is great. There's nothing wrong with one good sound. It's better than having no good sounds. But I do find that you need a good sounding guitar with the Mack amps, because they're a little bit unforgiving because it really does show the character of the guitar, and the playing and the fingers is, of course, you know, a big part of it. But you know, that's a big thing. You know, strings, picks, other stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I found that myself through my playing with the Mack amps, and I mean, we're specifically talking about the DB-40 here, and I think the answer to the tone chasers out there that are trying to figure it out, if you're playing in louder situations where you need that headroom, where you need to be able to get the amp to be clean and loud, but at the same time to really kick when you're kicking it in. That's where the DB-40 is really, really shining. And we'll talk probably in another video about the DB-18. We'll talk about the Heatseeker 18 and the Skyraider 18 and what they can deliver, because they are surprisingly loud amps as well for that wattage.
And I think you need it. It's because, you know, I think it's really important to play to the drums and play to the band before you're amplified. A lot of people say, hey, that's loud. Yeah, but if you're playing with a drummer that's got a very loud rock drum kit like a DW or something like I do, I don't really want to have to compete, and I don't really like to use monitors on stage. We played some big rooms lately, you know, some theaters like Montreal, like 2,000 people, and I just turn the monitor off. I want to hear the amps, and I want to hear the drums in close proximity, and I want to play to that, so my volume goes up and down. And then if I don't hear it, or if everything's loud, then you just have a tendency to play flat out.
Right.
And everything is just like a giant mush. And I mean, that can be cool, but it can really be tough on the audience because it can really wear their ears out. You know?
I guess that's one of the nice things about being an instrumentalist, as well as you don't have to worry about hearing the vocals.
No, no, we don't. Okay.
Well, I'd highly recommend you check out all of Dave's. Dave's got a couple of amazing CDs out. He's got a live video out. He's touring right now and writing new stuff. He's got some acoustic albums out, some ambient stuff. You can find that on, what's the website?
It's davidbarretttrio.com. And there's a link there with all the gear to the Dagmar guitars, Pigtronics, and the Mack Amps, of course.
And if you want to check out more videos on Mack Amps, obviously it's mackамps.com.
Yeah.
And this is the Atomsmasher DB-40, Dave Barrett's signature amp.
Thank you, Tracy.
Really great to spend some time talking to you today.